Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Trainer's Mail podcast. My name is Blake Whiteman, and I'm joined today by my lovely co-hosts Mitch
Hello.
and Jordan.
Yo.
Alright, so
I
my name...
genuinely thought that was Jordan just didn't say anything.
Just nothing
Fucking
from Jordan. That's classic. We're not doing second takes. That's legitimately how this is going to go like 90% of the time, so this is as good as it's going to get. My name is Blake Whiteman. I've been playing the game for over 10 years now. I've been to 2 World Championships, with my best finish being in 2015 in Boston. I played Night March and got 48th. For their accomplishments, people would much more closely know Jordan Palmer. Jordan, give us a little introduction. How people know you?
I've been playing, honestly, only slightly longer than Blake. So, what would that be, like maybe 12-ish years? 2011, 2012, I started playing in the senior division for a few years.
Yep.
So yeah, just been a part of the Australian Pokemon TCG community for a while now. Had some good results over the years, not so much recently. I haven't been quite as active in the last few years, but
It took a bit of a break
definitely
over the
keen
COVID period, right?
yeah, I mean, I guess everyone technically took a break over the COVID
Well,
period,
that's true.
so
Everyone took a forced break. And last but not least, Mitch Nucky. How does everyone know you, Mitch?
Well, they frankly shouldn't, but they do for whatever reason. So I've obviously
YouTube man.
I'm an ex-YouTuber. Yeah, absolutely. 4 months ago, I was
It's
a
official.
YouTuber at the Sableyes, but that'll probably happen again. I've been thinking about doing more stuff, but yeah, ultimately, people will know me from that and some smattered appearances, including 2 top 8s at regionals and a League Cup, which Blake can't say he's done. So that's
Yeah,
a big
I'm
win
still
for me.
hunting that first League Cup win, but as we found out today in my recent history, still continues to make sure that that's not going to happen. But today we're talking about the future of the Pokemon trading card game as we know it, because we're going to be looking at Temporal Forces, the new cards that we know about so far, and some of the results that we've got from Japan, because they have rotated already. Something we're waiting for 1st of April, I believe. And they've already had a big tournament over there, so we'll get to that. But we'll start by looking up some of the new cards, the more interesting ones.
Yeah,
We gotta
probably should have checked which ones were good before we started recording, but that's
no,
okay.
no. It's more natural this way. We got a Torterra EX. This one cares about big grass Pokemon. Is this good enough to make all the play stamped Gruddles that we have dozens of in South Australia be worth it? 30 times for each grass Pokemon.
I've got to say, having not read it, it's not very good.
It's not very good. It's not very good. Okay.
Do we still have that old semi-decent Torterra line in format?
The
Yeah,
Evo
which is
Press
why-
one, yeah, 50 times for each
Yeah.
evolved Pokemon in play. Definitely.
We'll never get a good
That's probably better than
than
that
this.
card's probably better than this card, right?
Yeah, probably.
Probably.
The one.
I
It's
will
like
say
the
it does have the benefit of having 340 HP and being weak to fire. So there's not actually enough fire stuff going around. Ironically, even though Charizard's probably the best deck, fire is not necessarily a type that's going to be around.
and it's
a lot,
weak to
so-
Torterra. And if Charizard's proven anything, it's that a bigger number sure does help a lot of the time.
Yep.
Here we go. Here's a
Torterra
potential
synergy.
card. Gouging Fire EX. Heat Blast. Fire Colorless for 60. 230 HP on a basic. These ancient Pokemon have ridiculous HP on them, I've noticed. With the booster capsule, they all get up to like 290, 300, which is crazy. And it does 260 for 3. 2 fire and a colorless. With the standard, can't use this attack until you switch, basically. What do we think about this card?
It's pretty good. I don't think it does anything outstanding, but like it's just a nice tech attacker for a deck that's playing fire energy.
I'll say it's
Which
probably
we all
it's,
know that there's one of those.
yeah, it's one of those cards that like Entei or Entei V or whatever cards are going into
Yeah.
your Charizard EX decks at the moment. This is just a better version of that, because now 260 you can knock out anything that's in play on the first couple of turns. It just gives you a decent little attacker into those Pokemon that might, frustrate you as a Charizard player. I'm thinking like Arceus Vs or Giratina Vs that are sitting in the active that you can't deal with. But otherwise, it's
Yeah.
not especially impressive.
Or even like as an option for like the Iron Valiant Entei decks to play like a slightly bigger Entei. You probably still want to play the Entei because you still want that access to Forest Seal Stone, especially after we lose Metacham V on rotation, and you probably won't be playing in that card. Or you won't have access to that V card, extra V card in the
Do we
deck.
lose Magma Stadium, whatever it's called?
Magma Basin's brilliant stars, so we keep that.
Yeah.
That's still around. So this
So like Magma Basin, sorry, not Welder, Sada
Sardas,
is a
yeah.
thing, right? You can just power this up for one turn.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can Magma Basin Sardas and then slap a Jet Energy on, bring it up to the active 260.
It's not bad, 260. I mean, it's just shy of hitting like the V-star mark, which I guess is going to be less.
If you
I think
factor
it's
in
still
like
pretty
Iron
good.
Valiant pings and stuff like that, it's just like a really effective, like basic knocking out V stars and sometimes larger. But whether it's on the same level as Valiant, especially when we lose a card like Escape Rope and Metacham V, probably brings it like out of the realm of playability, at least in that
Yeah, like
format.
This is the type of card that I could see, like, if it had been around back with, like, you know, you quick shooting Greninjas back when you were playing
Yeah.
those lines. This would be really, really good, because the 260, like, at the moment, it obviously deals with basic EXs quite nicely, but 260 doesn't quite reach into the Stage 1 EX, it doesn't quite reach into the Stage 2 EX, which is obviously a problem.
Yeah.
You can put the band on it, but it only goes to 310, so you're not knocking out everything.
Yeah, it needs a little bit of help at any point.
Yeah, and so if you had an extra couple of pings, then that could potentially be really good, but, you know, you don't... It's a lot of investment to try and get to work.
And that was one of the biggest
It's
selling points of
probably
Iron
easier to
Valiant.
power up a Roaring Moon.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, is this worth playing over a card like Roaring Moon EX, which does it better in a lot of cases? Like, you can, with a stadium, you're doing 220 and killing most of the basic EXs, apart from, like, the ancient ones or, like, your Iron Hands. And then you have Frenzied Gouging for everything in between with no extra help. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you, Mitch. It's probably more likely to see play as, like, a tech attacker slot in like a Charizard in the future, or like maybe even like an Armarouge type deck.
See, that I could see, like an Arceus Armarouge, and then have this as a tech attacker to
Yeah.
blow something up. That sounds pretty cool. That sounds like a deck that I would have made 5 months ago.
This actually did get featured on stream at the Fukuoka League, Champions League. And so the way they played it, they were playing it with a Barbarrel line, a mixture of Irida and Arven, I believe. Evolution TM to help get into Barbarrel and your Croconaw. Reversal Energy. So plays 4 copies of Reversal because it's a
Yep.
like a stage 2 with 1 prizes is obviously going to go behind while it's setting up. So reversals are active most of the
Do
game.
you know if that deck did any well at the tournament?
Oh no, it certainly wasn't in top 8, but as a concept, it seemed to. But as that concept, like it seemed to function pretty well.
Functioned, yeah. I think that's it functioned.
That's
And there's one other
better
synergy
than
that's very
Elvis.
cool. Obviously, there's the new aspect which we're going to get into later, which is the
energy.
the choice belt, the big belt, which is plus 50, which gets you to 330 on the breakpoint for Torrent Heart. With your Great Wave, it gets you from 280 up to 330. So you're killing everything with your Great Wave with that, or at least with that one attack anyway, before that one goes down or it gets lost vacuumed. But also, as a last like Hail Mary attack, you've also got access to Crisis Punch. So the new TM from Paldea and Fates that we haven't seen too much play yet, which we might see in the upcoming regionals now that we've had a few tournaments with that. But when you're on your opponent's on 1 prize card for 3 energy, does 280, and Torrent Heart does buff that damage, obviously, because it's a source coming from Veraligator. So 400 damage from Crisis Punch as well. So hypothetically, let's say Charizard, very strong deck, you 280 damage, kill a Pidgeot, 330 damage with the Choice Belt, kill a Charizard, and Crisis Punch, kill a Charizard.
Yeah.
If you can pull that off 3 times in a game, there you go, 6 prize cards.
That seems to function. I'm just one other issue that I have with the card is that if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little lightning symbol.
Hang on. I see. Now, are there any relevant lightning-type Pokemon in the format, Mitch?
I can't think of any specific ones that would take 2 prizes on this every single turn and win the game before it does anything. No.
Jordan, what do you
I
think?
mean, does
Can
it
you think of
matter?
any?
It doesn't matter, right? It's gonna put 5 damage counters on itself. It's gonna die regardless of the weakness.
Oh no, but then a hypothetical Iron Hands EX would need some sort of damage amplification to get to 140 if it wasn't for the weakness, Jordan. And there's, as we know, before this set comes out, there's no way other than Future Booster Capsule, which no Iron Hands deck is currently playing, to boost Iron Hands' damage. And I can't imagine them printing anything like that in this set, so nothing to worry about for hypothetical Feraligatr decks.
Feraligatr is safe from Iron Hands until about 35 minutes from now.
Yeah. But I mean, the key with Iron Hands is you have to be like winning the trade. So if the Iron Hands gets returned by another Feraligatr every turn, then you're eventually going to win out. And they have to keep pairing up the Iron Hands. So it's not necessarily bad unless you just run out of Feraligatrs before they run out of Iron Hands.
Yeah.
So
again, I love the card, but
I would love for this card to be good. That's currently where it stands.
Yeah. I like the art. It looks good.
It's probably about as good as you can get for a single prize stage 2 attacker. Like, the only time that single prize stage 2 attackers have ever been viable if they're like attached to another good stage 2 line like Gardevoir right now.
Actually, yeah, that's
usually.
Let's point out the fact that we are sitting here talking about the fact that a card for 2 energy deals 280 damage, and we're like, yeah, it's probably not good enough.
Yeah, it's hilarious. But one thing to consider with anything that evolves all the way up through its evolutionary round now is the new Relicanth, which is going to see a lot of play as like a one-of in those decks when these attacks matter, which is basically like the old Shrine of Memories, which all of us basically know what's going on, but for those of you who weren't playing when that card was around, it allows all of your evolved Pokemon to use attacks from previous evolutions. So if we go back to a card like Feraligatr, then suddenly attacks like Big Bite from cute little Totodile, 10 damage and they can't retreat, and then Reverse Thrust, which is Strafe, which is a pretty common attack archetype, which is 30 damage and you get to switch. So you could put this alongside, put a Klefki or a new Fluttermane from this set, which we'll get to in a bit as well, and can stall other decks that would probably run away with the game against slower decks like this, which is also an interesting option for the deck. We'll move on to a card that will actually see play for the first out of this list. Fluttermane. We got a basic ancient Pokemon with 90 HP. It's an unfortunate number to have for a basic because it means it's in Moonlight Shuriken range, but it has a great ability where as long as it's in the active, your opponent's active doesn't have abilities except for this ability. So if you also have a Fluttermane in the opposite active spot, you can not shut off each other's. It doesn't matter.
Nothing. It doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything. But you get to have it.
Why do they even need to have that text?
Well,
I'm not sure.
Text is irrelevant,
it could
right?
be like a supporter or something that draws based on the amount of abilities that are in play. So it is relevant that doesn't turn it off.
So the most important thing here that it shuts off is obviously Klefki's Comphase. The other little fairy jingly thingy that flies in the air for the Lost Zone. No flower selectings allowed while this is in the active.
Yep,
and
you can't be killed by Cram.
And you can't be killed by Cram because that gets shoved off too. And obviously the Lost Zone decks will be losing Escape Rope come rotation. So it's not going to be easy to push this guy out of the active either. So it's going to cost your boss's orders, or if they've taken a prize card with a counter catcher early on. And it has a serviceable attack too for 3 colorless, which makes it easily slottable into every ancient deck with Professor Sardas. 90 damage, and then you can put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. So you can split it up even, which is even better. 2 is not a large amount.
I actually just realized something reading this ability. I didn't realize until just reading this now that it doesn't specify basic. It just not shuts off your opponent's active Pokemon's ability, right?
Yeah.
So you can do some weird things like capture out, say, a Gardevoir EX that has no energy on it, and then it's stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's true. They have to evolve into a second one. It's pretty cool.
And it also means that if your opponent evolves into a Charizard EX in the active, bad luck. There's no energy coming out of that one, so it's like
True.
It's super useful
True.
in niche situations. It's obviously like the obvious application is Lost Box, right? That's the deck that it completely can lock down.
Yeah, if you
But
just open Lone Flutter Mane, then they don't get
yeah,
to play the game on their first turn.
there are situations that you'll have a Flutter Mane in the active, and suddenly you'll be able to do something like, oh, my opponent started their Radiant Greninja and they've bricked and they've got energy in hand,
But they
just
can't
draw
concealed cards.
Like,
Yeah.
there's just going to be lots of those
Stalkability as well.
situations. Yeah,
Or
exactly.
so, even staying on the Charizard train, like everyone's favorite pivot in that deck, having just tried it out today for the first time, Pidgeot EX. If you promote Pidgeot EX as your pivot, and you go to quick search, you can't do it there. You have to retreat first before you make your deck search, which could affect how your turns played out if you haven't already mapped out your prizes and stuff already, or not kept track of your resources properly. Suddenly, Flutter Mane disrupts their whole turn before they get to do stuff. So
the biggest one, which is one that people haven't, I don't think, talked about, or at least I haven't thought about until this moment, is that this could potentially this could potentially just completely ruin Arceus Giratina's day.
yes, no Starbirth.
You can't Starbirth because it's in the active. So I can see this coming up quite frequently and just being like, actually no, you can't use that because of my little mischievous man.
Yeah, I'll be perfectly
It's
honest.
pretty easy to play around because you can use the benched one still, but it's a little annoying at the very least.
Presuming that you have a benched one.
Yeah, sometimes
Well, yeah,
Arceus
it's
only
just a
gets
little
one
bit extra
down.
work you need to hit. Yeah, for
I
sure.
came into this pretty much only having the idea of Comfey in my head, and this actually has, because of you pointing that out, Jordan, has a lot more use cases than I previously thought. So a very strong card, which is going to get slotted into ancient box type decks and maybe into Roaring Moon lists as well.
I can't wait for this card to have been mistranslated and only do basics, because that's so likely as well.
Yeah, it happens all the time, these sorts of mistranslations. Especially because I don't think we've seen the English version printed. Sometimes we get a select few cards from Japan translated to English first, and then we get little pictures of it for some reason or another. But I don't think we've seen that yet for this card.
It just depends on whether or not. Usually, it depends on whether or not it's a promo.
I believe the ETB is a character. The character is the ETB promo for one of them.
Yeah,
So we might be able to see that. But yeah, we've got the Relicanth, Deeper Memories. So this is also applicable to V Pokemon for V Stars as well. So for Arceus V, you can still use Trinity Charge if you whiff an attachment. The V Star can still use Trinity Charge if you whiff your first turn attachment, which is nice. That's a good use. And Giratina V Stars can Abyss Seeking underneath the extra safety of 60 extra HP. And Shred, obviously. You're not locked into Lost Impacting every turn when you evolve, which is a nice little bonus.
Is it actually worth a slot and a bench space, though?
It's debatable, obviously. But
it's one of those cards that you want to know exists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something will come out, or something will already be floating around, and you'll be like, oh, well, now suddenly this attack, which is on a stage 1 or a basic, that is moderately useful, can be accessed. So I think the big one is like using the Feraligatr example from before. Totodile's attack lets you just lock something in the active. So if you have a rough time and your opponent can't switch, you can just lock something in the active for 10 damage.
Give you some time to set up while you're just trapping it.
So like those kind of things, those kind of niche things will come up every now and then. So it's not that there's a specific use case for it right now, but there will be eventually.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If there's not, you want to be aware of it just in case there is.
This is an answer to a question some point in the future. Like, for example, upon rotation, we lose Raihan, which means the old bailout for Arceus decks that have missed an attachment and got knocked out, they suddenly can't get a powered-up Arceus V-Star out of nowhere. The only card that helps you circumvent that problem is, there's Mela, which I don't recall if it attaches to non-fire types or not. I know it specifies fire energy, but I can't remember if it attaches to non-fire types or not. But also the other card, Gardenia, which we already know because no one's playing it, not a very good card. So being able to just say, hey, we'll evolve into the V-Star, and then we can Starbirth for the DTE and use Trinity Charge. We just need to make sure we get the energy in play. The 180 damage is nice, but maybe it doesn't matter in this matchup as much as just getting the field set up. So it's a nice option.
A nice card. Keep it in.
Definitely going to see play at some point, in my opinion.
That's fair.
And here's either a lot of people are looking forward to it, a lot of people are dreading it. It's inevitable. It's coming. It's Great Tusk. And with its
cool boy.
140 HP, it's an ancient Pokemon. For double colorless, it has Crust Collapse. Discard the top card of your opponent's deck. If you played an ancient supporter card from your hand during this turn, discard 3 more. So mill 4 every time you play an ancient supporter, which there are currently now 2 different ones. We're getting a new one this set. Explorer's Guidance, which is like the old Hapu, which is look at the top 6 cards of your deck, take 2, put them into your hand, and discard the rest, which is great at like thinning through your deck, finding double turbo energies to attack with this guy, but also enabling future Professor Sada's Vitalities by discarding basic energy. So you can play 4 of each of those guys, some power pads, and Pokegears to make sure you hit them every turn. A booster capsule on this brings it to 200 HP on a 1 prizer, and you're going to mill 4 cards every turn from your first turn all the way till the end of the game, which is pretty strong.
Durant.
Yeah, it's Durant, but you don't have to get down for Durant for the entire game or you lose. And it's got a lot of HP, so it's not necessarily going to get knocked out every turn like Durant was.
I think this has way more potential to be an actual deck. Obviously, milling cards is a strategy that lots of people are often quite awkward about. I personally think that this type of mill is very, very good because it gives someone that wants to play a different type of game something to do. And 4 cards a turn is not so many that the game is unplayable for your opponent. So
Absolutely.
There's still a chance that you're gonna play a game of Pokemon cards. And the thing that I really like about it as well, since it's got an attack for 160, if you're playing fighting energy, you can still like get into a position where if your opponent's just sitting there like kind of making your life difficult, you can still take prizes as well.
Yeah, you can put on the pressure. Like obviously you'd play double turbos and basic energies to enable Sadas and turn 1 Crust Collapses consistently. So getting to Giant Tusk and just start taking knockouts if they decide to not try to take prize cards on you as aggressively is definitely a way to progress the game state with this deck.
So I think that this is really, really good for the game. I would much rather my opponent actively mill me to death than just sit there and say, "Yeah, pass, it's your turn," and then I can't do anything because I chose not to play 1 copy of bloody Minior or something like that.
Yeah, and then all of your switch cards get milled by Misfortune Sisters, and then you're like, I guess I'll lose.
Yep.
I think the reason you feel that way, Mitch, is because it's even though it's not really a prize race, it still is a prize race in the sense that you're trying to take your prizes as quickly as possible.
There's a clear clock has been established by the presence of the card.
You are both actively playing towards a win condition, and I've spoken about this with a lot of people in my time. I hate stall variants, and I don't understand why anyone would choose to play it. Because if you're choosing to play stall, you're essentially saying, I don't want to play Pokemon today. I'm just going to roll the dice on X amount of people in the field not having an out to my deck. So I'm just going to be as frustrating and as tedious as possible. I'm going to sit down for 50 minutes every round for 10 rounds, and 8 people that I play against won't have an out. And I personally don't find that particularly fun and engaging. I completely understand that you may choose to do it, and that is your prerogative, but I don't have to think that that's a good decision.
I'm right there with you, Mitch, obviously. But like the other thing is that like it's just the Snorlax versus Great Tusk argument is just like the Snorlax isn't interacting as much. It's more like a deck list check versus a counterplay. With something like Great Tusk, you have cards like Super Odd, Iono, Power Pad, and cards like Lost Vacuum to help you take knockouts on these guys easier, and lots of deck management to help make sure that your deck doesn't run out before you get to take 6 prize cards. So I think this is a much more fun and interactive way to have an alternate win condition other than taking 6 prize cards versus the third counter catcher stuck. So unlucky. But anyway, if we get into this discussion, we're going to take up the entire rest of the podcast. So we'll move along because it's obviously a good card. And if nothing else, it'll get slotted in to other ancient decks because 2 colorless is easier to slot in. It's another easy win condition to tech into a deck that plays Professor Sarda's or Explorer's Guidance and can power it up. Because if your opponent gets too aggressive, you have to be thinking about this card at all times now when you're playing against an ancient deck.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, people should care about their resources in a healthy manner.
Nah, just bin them.
Just bin them. But speaking of things that are going to see play, we have the Ancient package. We have Baby Roaring Moon and Baby Koraidon. We'll start with the Roaring Moon, 140 HP, Dark type, Ancient Pokemon. For 2 Dark Vengeful Feathers, 70 plus damage. It does 10 more for each Ancient card in your discard pile. At first, I thought this said Ancient Pokemon, and I thought it was really bad. But then, it said Ancient Cards, and I was like, oh no. There's lots of those Earthen Vessels and Ancient Card, and so are the supporters and the booster capsules.
Yeah, this card is hard carried by the fact that Earthen Vessel is randomly an Ancient card.
Yeah, it's so strong. You can have a 200 HP basic that by default knocks out Comphase, but then ramps up to the point where it 2-shots Charizards and 1-shots the majority of basic EXs and Vs in the format, which is pretty nuts and synergizes quite well with, obviously, we've already got Dark Patch and Professor Sarda's in the format.
I think you could probably, with most of the lists that I've seen going around, I think you could realistically reach V-Star, numbers right at the end of the game. I think it'll cap around that 280-ish mark once you've both counts your loss.
Yeah, there's not quite enough Ancient cards in the format for you to get to Charizard numbers without something like a Defiance band. I think I've seen a handful of lists from local tournaments in Japan running around with 1 copy of that so that your last attack with that band and every other Ancient Pokemon and card in the discard pile, you can just barely get to 330.
Yeah, because a lot of the lists I've been seeing are at that 25 to 26-ish mark for number of Ancient cards in the deck. So assuming you have all 25 other Ancient cards in the bin plus your 1 Roaring Moon in the active, that's 320 base. So you would have to have the Defiance band to get a
yeah.
numbers.
And it allows you to prize 1 or 2 as well. When you've got so many of the Ancient cards in your deck, you're bound to prize 3 or 4 a game.
And you're almost never going to have a lone board of just 1 Pokemon either.
Yeah, absolutely. But to pair alongside this magnificent beast, which lacks an early game, we have a Dragon-type Koraidon with 140 HP, with Primeval Battering for a fighting... Or is that a fire and a colorless? I cannot... It's a fighting colorless. So 30 times the number of Ancient Pokemon... Of your Ancient Pokemon in play. So you can get up to 180.
The second attack does need a fire and a fighting.
Yes, okay, the second attack has the fire on it, and that's Shred, which... if you've got 1 good attack, if you were going to ask for someone for a second attack, Shred's usually one of the effects I would ask to have on a card, outside of something like a Frenzied Gouging. Just being able to get through effects is always really strong to have as an option. But being able to...
People aren't really playing fire energies, but once again, if something comes out that stops basics from attacking...
Yeah, yep. And obviously, the Pokemon Trading Card Game International have a habit of repeating these sorts of abilities and effects because there's a limited amount of effects they can print on cards, so eventually they'll repeat themselves, as you'll figure out from the rest of this pod when we'll refer to cards that this is exactly a copy of, but with 20 extra damage, or on a basic instead of a stage 1. So these will come up as they go along.
Challenge. We should be able to reference an old card to for every single Pokemon. Like Roaring Moon, that's just Vespiquen.
Yep.
Right on,
Well, it
that's
is,
just
yeah.
Meganadel.
Yep, exactly.
We can do this.
Oh yeah, we absolutely could. We're not going to though. That'll take even longer than this is already going to.
I mean, we will, and we have.
Okay, well you guys will. So Koraidon can obviously the only thing that hurts this card a lot is the loss of Battle Pass in rotation. The only thing we have to get the big guys now, we have Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, and Artisan. Those are great options, but none of them grab two at once, so we lose out a little bit.
It's not an evolving deck. Like, you get 2 Pokemon in play turn 1. That's fine. That's all you need for turn 1. Like, you're not really looking to fill your bench turn 1 or anything.
Yeah, and obviously, with an archetype like this, your options aren't limited to these two. Obviously, you could put in a copy of Roaring Moon EX, any of the other ancient Pokemon with their respective energy can just be slotted in as a 1 or 2 of to have them access to them as an attacker. Obviously, you have the Fluttermane, which is a very strong card to have access to, especially if it turns out that decks like Lost Box are a bad matchup for this deck. I don't know if it is. We haven't played with it yet. But if it is, Fluttermane slots in perfectly into a deck like this. Now, these are basics with 140 HP, so they're around the range of Iron Hands. We have Slitherwing as an option to deal with Iron Hands as a threat. Another ancient Pokemon, does 120 for 2 fighting. So this deck has all the tools to be a successful deck, and it's about to get more as we progress through the set as well. But we have another strong ancient Pokemon that'll be in its own archetype before then, and that's Raging Bolt EX. It's a big basic dragon, 240 HP, another ancient Pokemon. Its first attack, for a colorless, discard your hand, draw 6, strong start, good attack.
That's really good, actually.
Yeah, and then for lightning and fighting, Extreme Ascent, 70 times the amount of basics energy attached to your Pokemon in play that you choose to discard. So this is just a power-scaled version of Chen Power, any way you look at it, already.
Yeah, I was also thinking it's kind of like Reshiram Zekrom tag team, which has got a similar attack.
That's true, and also a similar HP.
So...
Except
pretty solid card. I think that the history of Reshiram Zekrom is very similar to what will happen for Raging Bolt. As in, lots of people will go, that's a massive amount of damage. That's super
it has
cool.
to be good.
That's going to be really good, and then no one will play it because there are just better options.
Well, I mean, you say that this is better Chen Power, but it's really only 10 damage more on the multiplier, and the energy cost is significantly worse.
It's more difficult to get lots of them in play as well.
But for 4 energy, you do 280 and kill V-Stars, where Chen Power needs 5. And that is a hurdle I am not willing to jump for Chen Power, which is definitely not getting stronger after this set comes out.
Yeah, because Chen Power would need 1 card to get 6 energy in its hand. That would be really tricky.
Yeah, whereas this card just needs them in play.
Chen Power would need to use Superior Energy Retrieval and its ability to get 6 energy.
And that's insane.
But
yeah, that's not possible.
You're overlooking a huge thing that this has gone for Chen Power, though, Mitch. You're overlooking that this doesn't require a Stage 2 in play.
That's true. You just need to have a supporter.
Yeah, currently as a means, obviously Sada's accelerating 2 per turn. We don't have any other acceleration apart from we have Energy Sticker.
We've got the Sandy Shocks EX, which you can put energy in play with, right? So it's not like you can't get energy in play, but it's the awkwardness of trying to get the attack off every turn.
The unfortunate thing, like we've talked about with, earlier on in the day, we talked about Gardevoir versus Charizard. The first knockout on Charizard is the hardest, and it's going to be the same for this deck because Sandy Shocks has the limiting case of you can't use the ability until your opponent's on 4 prize cards or less. So the first one's going to be the hardest to do. So your opponent can set up a strong board state without answer from Raging Bolt, and that might be why the deck doesn't do so well, as it's going to have a hard time being proactive against its opponents unless it plays a card like the Sticker, or I've seen crazy versions of the list go around, but Gardevoir has not really coped well from rotation over in Japan with the loss of Level Ball and the Shining Arcana Gardevoir. So they've put the Refinement Curliers and the Gardevoir EX alongside Raging Bolt. so that you can just slam a bunch of psychic energies onto the board, onto random psychic Pokemon, and then just have Raging Bolt discard them, because it doesn't care which energies it discards, unlike Chien-Pao.
That's basically just the same as using Zacian V, which rotates as well. So it's kind of I think it does at least. So it's kind of a replacement for that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Obviously,
you can also do like electric generator with electric Pokemon on the bench, or like even Moltres V with dark energy if you want to be crazy. Like it can be any kind.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, because it doesn't care, like any energy acceleration works for Raging Bolt. You can use Excalibur. Let's just put in lightning and fighting energy into Chien-Pao.
There's already lightning energy in Chien-Pao, so we're halfway there.
Yeah, but the trick with that is you have to find a way to attach a lightning and a fighting in one turn, and that doesn't help that. Yeah. So we'll see. The jury's not quite out yet on Raging Bolt EX. It's got strong enough text on the card for it to do well.
In isolation, this card is a good card.
Yep, very strong. And again, an ancient Pokemon with 240 HP, 300 with a booster capsule. It's ridiculous that something has that much HP for such little effort. That can put out that much damage. So I think this is one of the first appearances of a decent Dunsparce since it's been released. But we've got a Dunsparce that has free retreat, which is cool. That makes anything that it evolves into even more playable. But the Dunsparce, 140 HP evolves from Dunsparce, dashing draw. Once during your turn, you may draw 3 cards. If you do choose to do so, shuffle this Pokemon and all of its attached cards into your deck, which is really cool. It means it's a reusable effect. You can just chuck down a bunch of Dunsparce, and then you can draw 3, and then another Dunsparce is available. So you could hypothetically prize like 3 or 4 Dunsparce, but declare the effect several times over a game still.
Yeah, but I think this is a really, really cool little support Pokemon, and this is the kind of stuff that I like. Is like a nice generic, normal Duns, like this kind of Pokemon you can just chuck into anything. It's super solid. It's not broken. We're not going to see decks that are completely like broken off the chain because of this, but it's useful. And also in decks that are weak to fighting, that have normal type Pokemon, you can use the old Dunsparce to evolve into it, so you can play that.
That might be rotating. I'm not sure
I
if
don't think so. I think it's in the same set as
Manaphy.
No, I think it's in the same set as. I think it's Brilliant Stars. I'll have to double check.
Yeah,
that's the same set as Manaphy.
I'm fairly certain that it's in Arceus's set, but it's just a nice, solid, techie kind of card that you can include into a list and get some extra benefit from. So very, very cool.
The other thing that's cool about this card is it's also like secretly an anti-deck out card, because you draw the 3 first, and then it shuffles itself back in. So as long as a Dunsparce is on the bench, you can't deck out.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, very cool.
At least on your turn.
You'll get discarded by the
Great Tusk. Yeah,
that'll get you. But
you use all your dashing draws, and then Great Tusk mills for the Dunsparce, and you're really, really sad.
I guess the main question is, how does this compare to Barrels? I think they're in the same kind
absolutely.
of Barrels probably better overall, but I think there's a use case for this where there are some decks that'll prefer this over Barrel.
Yeah, I mean, it's also nice to have like a draw support Pokemon that's not a downside to be on your bench. Obviously, you know, if you've played Chien-Pao or Arceus, decks that have played Barrel in the past, you know that if played against a deck like Giratina, you can be in a large advantage, but then you get counter-captured your Barrel into the active, you get Roxanne, and then they start using Lost Mine while you can't retreat out of the active. But the Dunsparce doesn't have that issue. If they counter-capture it, you can just declare its ability and shuffle it away, and you get to draw 3 to draw out of the Roxanne as well.
And
so
the other thing is
that's
as well
so
that
cool.
you'll be sat there with a hand of 6 cards and a Barrel on the bench, and you can't do anything because the 6 cards that you have are bad. Whereas the Dunsparce, you can at least go, okay, well, I'm just going to draw 3 more. And hope
it'll always draw 3 instead of being like limited to your hand size.
You can have like 3 of them on board banked. You've got like a 9-card draw bank.
Absolutely.
If you need it.
Yeah.
And with a HP total of 140, it's not one Lost Mine away from being denied of you either after a Roxanne. So you can't just Roxanne and chuck 120 on a Dunsparce to stop them from drawing out of it. It's living. So obviously there's use cases for this. And there are card effects like obviously the less than playable Tinker Tiny X, which cares about hand size, has synergy with cards like this. For those of you looking to make rogue decks, this is a great addition to that little deck. But there are archetypes that care about stuff like this, and it's definitely a consideration for decks moving forward.
Yeah, good card to have in the pool.
Speaking about good cards to have in the pool, Chinchino. Special role, 110 HP, evolves from Minchino. We've got a great Call for Family Minchino already. But 110 HP, stage 1. Special role, 70 times the amount of special energy cards attached to this Pokemon. So not how many energy is on it, so double turbo is only counted for 1, because it's the card itself and not how many energy is being provided. But still, obviously, for a deck like Lugia, a 1-prizer with scaling damage like this, it's just the sort of thing that Lugia was asking for after being gone from the format for quite a spell.
Yeah, Lugia definitely benefits from this. This is very, very good. But there's a concern because Lugia has a pretty average time against Iron Hands, which is going to be very, very strong. But the fact that it has an attacker now that is useful with the variety of colorless energy that we have floating around is really, really cool.
Yeah, it's just another piece for the deck.
I'm concerned about adding an extra evolution line to a deck that already struggles a bit with consistency. But it at least, it gives it that potential that it didn't already have. So
you've got a Master Ball, Jordan. You can Master Ball for him. It's fine.
Oh yeah, we're about to get to that guy. You can Master Ball for anything. That's what makes it so strong. But being able to scale up to the numbers of, say, Charizard, which I think is definitely probably the number 1 deck that might have been gatekeeping Lugia out of this format, a great answer for this deck. Obviously, you can just use double Archeops Primal Turbo to a Chinchino, attach for turn, as long as only one of those cards was a double turbo, because it brings your damage down by 20 for each of those cards attached. You get to that 350 minus however many double turbos you've got attached, and then you can knock out a Charizard EX with a 1-prizer, which is crazy. But here we have our first A-Spec of the set, and we're talking about the prospect of Ancient Pokemon. This is one of the most nuts effects we've ever seen on a card. Obviously, you're limited to 1 A-Spec, so they better be good. This just says draw a card for each of your Ancient Pokemon in play. You can have 6 of those guys at once.
Item draw 6, pretty good.
Yeah,
I think this is the strongest effect on any of the A-Specs.
Yeah.
Which is a wild thing to say, because there are some pretty strong A-Specs.
We haven't even gotten to them yet, but there are some bonkers effects on these cards, and this is the strongest. Obviously, this is gatekept by the fact that this is limited to Ancient Pokemon, so that immediately knocks out 75% of the format, maybe more, that aren't playing a large amount of Ancient Pokemon. So your Roaring Moon, your Big Thunder Cloud Man, and your Great Tuscan Ancient Box are like the only decks that can hypothetically play this card effectively.
I was going to say, realistically, this card may as well say, draw a card for each Pokemon that's an Ancient Pokemon in play and deal 10 extra damage for the rest of the game. Because the one deck that it's going to be in is going to be in the Baby Roaring Moon deck. So
yeah, absolutely. It also happens to have the stamp that says plus 10 damage.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's fantastic. Okay,
Yeah, let's move on.
It's speedrun time. We lost Battle Pass, we got Buddy Puffin, so basic Pokemon with more than 70 HP lose out from this, but decks like Chen Pao, who really want to get 70 HP guys or lower out onto the field, get access to this card, and you're not gate-kept by the first turn of the game. This card is active for the entire game, baby. It's just the HP.
Incredible card that makes Chen Pao so much more consistent. I've been doing a little bit of testing. One of the games that I played against Chen Pao, the strategy would have been knock out the baby Frigibaxes and hope for the best, right? But my opponent could just get 2 more anytime. And
as soon as you knocked out 2, they can Super Rod and then immediately put them both back onto the bench.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. In the past, we've had a skateboard. They didn't even decide to change the mode of transportation. It's still a skateboard. This time, it's just an emergency. You have to pay 1 less cost to retreat on your Pokemon. And if it has 30 HP or less, it has no retreat. So if it's just a really small Pokemon, or if it's taken a buttload of damage, you can get a very heavy Pokemon out of the active. This is a good effect for decks like Lost Box, which like to switch a lot. With the loss of Escape Rope, something like this helps bring it back up to par. Obviously, you only get one retreat per turn, so it's not necessarily better, but always having the safety of having one Comfey that can be promoted and freely retreated out of is always nice to have for a deck like that. So I think this will be a really good card in that deck, and maybe as a one-of in decks that play like Radiant Greninja and don't have like a free retreat pivot option. All right, cool. So we have a reprint of Ancient Booster, and we have the brand new tool, Maximum Belt, which is the name that I forgot when I was trying to describe this earlier.
It's Big Belt.
Big man belt. Attacks from this Pokemon that this card is attached to do 50 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX. So it doesn't affect V-Stars or Vs or anything like that, just EX, but that's really the only thing you need to reach for with a plus 50. This is huge for cards like Arceus V-Star and Giratina.
I thought that it was against Rulebox originally. I thought it was a bit better than
so you can really kill those Radiant Pokemon.
Well, it's more for like V's are still relevant.
Yeah. It's not going to help like a Charizard kill like an Arceus V or something like that.
Yeah. And ironically enough, this is actually one of the reasons why Arceus Giratina is a deck that's doing so well in Japan, is because it can make use of this particular ace spec. They can do 250 damage or something like
230 with a DTE.
Yeah, to a 2-prize Pokemon that your opponents put into the active. So any of those 2 prizes, you can just straight up take a knockout on 2 prizes and accelerate some damage, accelerate some energy, to a bench Pokemon. But your opponent can't do the same to you. So they will have to deal 2 damage
they're like,
naturally.
Hey, don't knock out my Iron Hands EX with your Maximum Belt. No, I'm going to do it.
No, can't do it. And also it means that your Giratina can theoretically reach just that little bit higher.
Reaches 330.
330 is a pretty good number, just generally.
That's the Charizard number. It's the best number.
So you can put it on either of your attackers. The only issue that I have is that you can't play more than one.
Yeah, that's a shame. But, like, obviously referencing back earlier, we're trying to say, what does Torterra do better than Charizard? Doesn't die to Giratina with a max belt.
So true.
Only dies to Lost Requiem, and we're about to see later on in the set, there's a special energy that can help you with that too, so maybe Torterra EX isn't as bad as we thought, hey guys?
Make sure you get your 4 Torterras.
Alright, we talked about this, referenced this card earlier, the new Ancient Supporter Explorer's Guidance. Harpu reprint, look at the top 6, put 2, discard the others. Harpu saw play in a one-of in the World Championship finalist deck from Shintaro, and that's the only thing you've probably ever seen it in that you can remember, because it didn't see a lot of play, but it didn't have that fortunate little sticker at the top right that says Ancient, and therefore this is one of the best cards in the format, so yay! Decks that care about that stamp are playing 4 copies of this card, and there's no alternative. Move on. Eri.
Yeah, pretty much.
No, go ahead, John. You can talk about the card.
No.
You done?
No, I was just going to say that Harpu, Harpu was played as a 4-of or something, but I don't remember what it was.
It was ADP. You played ADP with Harpu.
No. That was Clay.
No, that was Clay.
Oh, that was Clay.
We played Clay DP.
What a time. Did Henry play it in Washington? He might have played Harpu. That seems like a card that was.
Bill's analysis.
Something.
Bill's analysis.
Yeah. There's been so many different cards that have this effect.
Yeah,
None of them are in this set though. The next supporter that is in this set is Eri, and we love Stool here. Look at your opponent's hand, choose 2 items, and discard them. This sucks.
Gonna be a frustrating card for lots of people. It's items as well. It's like all the good cards.
Like switches.
Like your I don't know, your ace spec card that you just discard. You can't use it.
Hey, Choice Bell isn't a tool. It isn't an item. So even better again.
Yeah, the first time that the errata from going away from item cards and just being tool cards has actually helped them for once.
Yeah.
Can't be Eri. Yeah, that's why they made the change.
That's why they changed it. They wanted to print Eri and A specs. We got a next A spec, probably the worst one. It might be the only one that doesn't see play at a competitive level. Neo Upper Energy. When it's attached to a Pokemon, it provides colorless energy. But if it's attached to a stage 2, it provides every type of energy, but only 2 energy at a time. So it's reversal, but 2, but
Double rainbow, yeah.
Evo, but not
It's
behind. It's
very, very strong.
it's
But
niche.
you don't wanna play this. The issue that this card has is that it's an A spec, so you don't want to play this instead of one of the many other good A spec cards.
Here's
If this was just a regular energy,
yeah. I think that's the problem. Is that if you took the pink border off this card and still printed it, it still might not see play,
yeah.
and that's the issue. So it probably never
this-
sees play.
This is the kind of card that if this card was needed to make something work, then it wouldn't be worth it because you'd be too reliant on a spec. And if it doesn't need it to make the deck work, then why bother playing it?
Now, finally moving on to the second half of the set, we have, well, let's see, we don't have much to start off with. Oh, the grass types are woeful.
Yeah, it's pretty grim.
Here we go, here's a good one. Iron Leaves EX.
It's been a grim 25 years for grass type Pokemon, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's not been great. But here's a good one. It's a 220 HP Grass EX Iron Leaves. It's a future Pokemon. Ability Rapid Vernier. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may switch this Pokemon into the active position. If you do, you may move any number of energy from your bench Pokemon to this Pokemon. And then for Grass Colorless, 180 damage, and this card can't attack next turn. So this is
So
obviously...
it's different to effects like Weird Ear, where the ability procs when you put it in the active. It puts itself in the active on bench.
This is equivalent to the old Dragonite EX from long ago with the bust-in effect. So it activates on the benching of the card and not the bringing it to the active position like Heatran GX or
Dragonite
Wood
the
Air.
one that you thought of?
Because I remember the name bust-in always of the ability always stuck with me because I played it a little bit as well.
Tapu Koko GX.
Because its ability's name isn't Bust-in, Jordan. It's whatever Tapu Koko's ability is called.
I have no idea.
I remember Tapu Koko's V-Star power or whatever its GX attack more than its actual rest of its card did.
Anyway, this
That is
card's
very fair.
green and it deals enough damage.
Yes,
Charizard,
this
right?
card is green. It's easy to attack with as a tech attacker because it attaches energy to itself without revealing itself, and is green and does enough that when you multiply it by 2, it kills Charizard EXs. So
you put
this
it
is a
in your Arctina and you just fire it into the active once against Charizard. No
or
problem.
into your future box decks that you can slap a couple grass energies in, and then surprise, this comes out of nowhere, kills a Charizard. So this is the first of.
It's not even bad either.
Yeah,
for,
it's
like,
great.
buffing
Yeah,
Divine
as a
Crown, but-
baseline to be buffed by future cards we might see in this part of the set, it's a good number. One retreat. Yeah, it's a good card. It's going to go on anything that hates Charizard and can afford to play Grass Energy or accelerate them. So we have Incineroar EX up here. Stage 2, 320 HP. Attacks used by this Pokemon cost a colorless less for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So a little bit different to Radiant Zard. This cares about bench Pokemon as opposed to prize cards taken, but with a similar sort of statting where it does 240 for 5, with fire being the main cost and then the others being reduced by the ability. And it also burns the opponent's active. So technically it does 260 with the burn if they get affected by it.
Yeah, so really you need to read this card as doing maybe 260 for 2, and then suddenly it seems like it's not that bad a choice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the issue is that it's a stage 2, right? So are you gonna
And a
play
fire one, so you can't Irida for it.
So are you gonna play this over your Entei with a hat?
or a Charizard.
Yeah, or a Charizard, which is doing way more for.
Which is
like, we're
another
literally just
stage
talking
2.
about we're literally just talking about what's it called? Raging something? Raging
Bolt.
Entei, whatever his name is.
Oh, Gouging
Raging-
Fire.
Yeah, that's the one.
Entei with a hat.
That's just this.
Entei with a
that's just
hat.
this card on a basic.
Yep.
Yes, I didn't remember what its actual name was, but what I think was a missed opportunity of this card is it would have been really cool if they gave Litten and Torracat really cool attacks. that you
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
Evolved into Incineroar to make them free. That would have been sick.
Yeah,
as
like
for
the
Torracat,
the cat deck. What was the cat deck that the Persian activated?
Cataday.
Cataday, yeah. like those sort of decks. Because I think there was a Litten or something that did cool stuff in that deck as well.
Yeah, like, it would have been so cool if there was like a really cool strong attack on Torracat that was overcosted, but then you evolve into Incineroar to make it cheap. It would be
Yeah,
really
yeah, that'd have
handy.
been really cool. Right now, the only
missed
decent
opportunity
attack to
there.
copy is Fake Out to coin flip, paralyze them.
Just jumping back in, there are no legal Torracats or Littens that have colorless in their attack cost. So goodbye to the bin with thee.
Oh, what good is any set without a really fun meme deck? Iron Thorns. Destro Press, 70 damage, 70 times. Reveal the top 5 cards of your deck. This attack does 70 damage for each future card you find. Discard the future cards you revealed in this way. Shuffle the others back. So,
Very cool. I actually really like this as a concept.
yeah.
I always like these kind of cards, but they're never good, but they're fun. So.
Luckily, even though it looks like a Tyranitar, it's a basic. So you don't have to put in all the effort to do something really cool. You just probably have to power it up with an electric generator and then play a bunch of Iron Hands and capsules and supporters and stuff like that synergize with it. And maybe, and then, yeah, fun. We're going to move on to Iron Crown ZX here. Basic Psychic type, 220. It's a future Pokemon. If you've been around the block for as long as we have, you know that this card is a weird way to spell Deoxys EX. It says Cobalt Commander on its ability. Your future Pokemon attacks, except Iron Crown EXs, do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. And then for...
this is Regirock. Regirock EX.
Oh, yeah, my bad. No, that did 10. That did 10, Jordan. Don't be silly. And then Twin Shotel.
So did Deoxys.
I'm not accepting questions at this time. Psychic Double Colorless Twin Shotels. This does 50 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. This attack's damage isn't affected by weakness, resistance, or any effects on those Pokemon. This goes through Manaphy.
Yeah, so it's a pretty handy little attack that you could theoretically use, but obviously the ability's the big thing. And this is why we've been talking about Iron Hands being genuinely threatening. Finally, like
because these stack.
Good, but this is very good because it means that your Ampy very much can reach 200 quite comfortably.
Yep. And that's
Have we ever seen Shred on a snipe attack before?
I don't know. I don't think so, honestly. This might be the first time, at least on a good card. This is the first time we've seen it for sure. But this is just a huge enabling part to the future, like just future Pokemon in general. Like we already had the Future Booster Capsule, but like Turo as a card isn't specifically designed to help future Pokemon by comparison to Sada. So it was sort of screaming out for a little bit of support, but I think Pokemon might have, had something in mind where they sort of tease out the good future Pokemon a little bit at a time with Iron Valiant and Iron Hands, and then they're like, hey, bombshell, here we go, Iron Crown EX. These guys just get ramped up a little bit more.
I think that the Iron Crown is basically just going to be the embodiment of what all future cards are going to be looked at and compared to as to how well they use this card. It's like basically the signature card of the future archetype, I think.
Yeah, the good thing about Iron Crown is it does the 2 things that future Pokemon have so far been able to do. It helps both of them. So it helps those like big Pokemon that deal small amounts of damage with really cool effects. It helps them boost their damage output up, so your Iron Hands, those kinds of things, get to do a little bit of extra damage. But it also can potentially help those decks like Iron Valiant that are pinging damage onto the bench with its Twin Shottles or whatever. It's actually going to be cool, because I can't imagine that Twin Shottles is the name.
Shotels is a bit too Egyptian coded for Pokemon.
Exactly. I'm not sure that that's going to be the words, but
we have a very bad track record for names of attacks on future Pokemon right now, though.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so
I don't think a large part of the Western world knows what a Shotel actually is. So I imagine if there's 2 of them, it's going to be very hard to understand.
Yeah, well, I'm completely lost. All I know is that this card's super, super good for any type of future deck that you want to make. So we've now seen that our ancient decks are obviously built around like massive HP and collectively building up damage over time, and our future Pokemon are about doing lots of snipe damage and building up damage through abilities and items, and I think that's really cool.
I also think that like if you were looking at the future Pokemon up until now, like the set before, and obviously up until we saw this card, you might have thought, aren't the numbers on these cards a little bit too weak by comparison to the rest of the cards?
They're
And
always
they
like
have to
20
be,
60, yeah.
because they have to be 60 less than you would hope for them to be, because they're printing Iron Crown, because otherwise they'd be much too strong. And that's why, like, all of the numbers, they're like, oh, but that doesn't reach any important breakpoints. It's because that when you have 2 to 3 copies of Iron Crown EX and a booster capsule, then all the numbers make sense. And oh, okay, I see what was going on here.
That's why my Iron Valiant EX was never quite doing enough damage in testing. It's
Yeah, exactly. That was it.
The next card hadn't come out yet.
Okay, we're going to take a quick little detour for this cute little guy, a Drillbur. And he has a great ability if you love getting basic fighting energy in the discard. You bench him, and he searches for 3 basic fighting energies, and he discards them. If you're a Garchomp enthusiast, this is the card for you, because he just activated your first attack instantly.
Yeah, super free.
Is it Koraidon V from
EX?
Koraidon EX from base Skull and
Yep,
Violet.
Koraidon too.
Likes this.
Yep, and also for a deck that's using fighting energy to Sardas, this automatically activates that also. No need to Earthen Vessel, you can just Ultra Ball for it, Buddy Puffin for it, or I can't remember if Buddy Puffin goes to hand, yeah.
Neat little card you could play for your Raikou with a long neck.
Yeah, Raging Bolt, man.
Wait, does Buddy Puffin go to hand or bench?
I don't recall.
It goes straight to bench. So
okay, so you can't Puffin this.
You need to play it from hand, so like Nest Ball doesn't work. But still, it's neat.
It's a cool card.
I don't like the idea that you have to Ultra Ball for it.
Yeah, especially because we lose Level Ball. It might actually be harder to use than first thought, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think
the key concept is that it as a card is a cool effect.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, even if it's not now, there'll be something that we can use this for.
Especially if there's a good extra drill at some point in the future, which this one certainly isn't. So we'll move on.
No, we're gonna move past.
Farigiraf EX, Stage 1, 260 Dark type, Volsum Girafarig, Armor Tail, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon from your opponent's basic Pokemon EX. So we don't need the Shred on Koraidon, but there are other basics that this Pokemon blocks damage from. And then for Psychic, double colorless, even though it's a Dark type, this attack does 160 and then 30 to a bench Pokemon. So it's got a serviceable attack and walls basic EXs like your Chen Powers and stuff like that, and your Roaring Moons. But again, Roaring Moon gets through this with Frenzied Gouging. So you'd need a pretty cool special energy to get through that sort of effect. Metang. With Metal Maker, its ability, you can, once per turn, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, choose any number of basic metal energy you find there, attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. This card's nuts. This card is not limited to once per turn, so you can have multiple Metangs in play. It's not capped, unlike Generator. So if you hit more than 2 metal energy, you can attach all of them wherever you like. It's not limited to bench. It's not even limited to metal Pokemon, which a lot of the times these sorts of effects are. I think this is an incredibly strong effect. And it's got the hidden extra buff of 100 HP, so that Radiant Greninja's Moonlight Shuriken doesn't take 2 prize cards on 2 bench-sitting Metangs.
And that actually is a buff now that Level Ball rotated instead of being a nerf.
Yeah.
I think this is a really, really good card. I just don't think that there's an attacker that exists that really makes use of it yet.
Currently, there are 2 main frontrunners. There's the obvious one, which people are going to go to immediately, which is Dialga V-Star, because its attack scales with metal energy, and its Star Cronus ability is very strong, but requires a lot of energy, and in the past, Metal Saucer, before it rotated, was not enough to get you there. And on top of that, there's also the Retaliate Zamazenta, which saw some play in Lost Box decks in the past. But now you could just play like 3 to 4 copies of that card, and it's a really big basic that just does 220 every turn that you get knocked out on. And Metang does a pretty good job of streamlining those attackers back to back. So very powerful, especially if we get a Metagross printed that is better than the one they gave us in this set, because that one is not very good.
Unfortunate, because I think that could be the break point between Metang being like a big deal or not, is whether I had a good Metagross to go with it.
I thought this card was bad, but I've seen a copy of it in a list, in a Future Box list, so I'm assuming it's got to do with the ability Iron Treads, When this has a future booster capsule energy future booster energy capsule attached to it, it's fighting and metal at the same time. So maybe it's exploiting weakness, and that's why the card's played, because it's 130 HP, and then for a metal and a colorless, it does 60, and you get to move an energy to one of your bench Pokemon. So with Amp, I've got to imagine it is, or something like that, like, because you can get to 120 off of 3 modifiers, 2 crowns, and a capsule, to get the fighting type involved as well.
Three crowns and a capsule kills an Arceus, I think, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably more for your like Iron Hands or something like that.
It hits Chen Power for weakness as well. So obviously, like with 3,
that's funny.
With 3, you get to 120, and then your one prizer kills a Chen Power. So that's cool as well. So there's use cases for it. It's a techable like one prizer that helps maintain energy on board even if this gets knocked out. But the more impressive one prize attacker is the whole selling point of the deck. Before this card was talked about, you're probably thinking, I don't think Future Box has enough to pull it all together. This is that card. It's Miraidon. It's a dragon type with 110 HP. It's a basic future Pokemon. For 1 colorless, Speed Peak does 40 damage. You get to search your deck for up to 2 basic energy and attach them to your future Pokemon in any way you like. Doesn't matter what kind. Search them out. Spread them amongst your future Pokemon. That's crazy.
That's better than Thunderous.
It's your
yes.
or your DK, absolutely.
You don't even need to put them in the discard pile to activate it. It's in your deck. It's always live. And it even costs a color, so it doesn't care about what energy is attached to use the attack. And for Lightning Psychic, Sparking Attack does 160. On a basic, when you have the crowns and the booster, for 3 boosts on that, you're getting 220. For 4, you get to the Iron Hands Roaring Moon EX range of 230. You're taking knockouts with a one prizer.
Yeah, it's a very, very good card for setting up Iron Hands as well, which is why Iron Hands as a deck is like a 4-of kind of situation now. Because it's suddenly all of the weaknesses of Iron Hands, the fact that it needs 4 energy and the fact that it only deals 120, just got solved by these 2 cards in this set. So,
yeah, and it's the only downside to this card is that it itself is weak to Iron Hands.
Yeah, so it's knocked out by Iron Hands, which is unfortunate.
There's an ebb and flow. But this card enables so many different archetypes of future Pokemon because it's any type. If it's got future at the top right corner of the card, this card probably goes in that deck.
I also love that you can either spread or stack the energy. That's really
Absolutely. You can go all in or thin it out a little bit. All right, we got some...
That's really good for Iron Hands, just having a spread of energy. Sorry, not Hands, Leaves. Have a spread of energy on the board.
Yeah, exactly. You can just chuck 2 grass on 2 different Pokemon that aren't worth bossing up into the active. And then with an attachment from anywhere, next turn Iron Leaves is already up and ready to attack. Oh, we also have a decent Dramper here that I hadn't seen previously. We've got, for 3 colorless, a Dramper with 120 HP, Raging Charge, 3 colorless. Oh, all your bench Pokemon. Never mind, move along.
Skipping.
Hand Clippers. Both players discard cards in their hand until they both have 5. Your opponent discards first. If you don't discard if you have 5 or less cards in your hand. So if your opponent's got a huge hand, they're playing Gardevoir, they're playing Lost Box, and they've just been flower selecting and using concealed cards and Colress over and over and over again, Hand Clippers is a nuts card against those decks. Especially if you're playing something like a Great Tusk that cares about the total cards between hand and deck when they start playing stuff like Iono or, Judge. I was going to say Roxanne, but you're not taking prize cards in that deck most of the time. So, but this is a nice option for decks that hoard resources if you're a control player.
At least it says that it's not random cards. You have to choose the best 5 cards.
Yes, your opponent chooses, yeah.
That's good.
So you choose the worst cards.
It's also both players. It'd be funny to do like Hand Clippers into Eri. Is that her name?
Yeah. So you know they've held on to like 2 really good cards, and then they have to discard.
That also brings that total hand size down to 3, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, it's a solid card, and it might see play in those decks that care about milling or stalling. But if you thought, hey, maybe that double turbo energy card isn't too bad as an A spec. That's because we haven't quite gotten to Prime Catcher yet. Prime Catcher, if you've played around for a little bit, used to be a supporter card called Guzma, and that's one of the best supporters we've ever seen in this game. But this is on an item card. You can Pokestop into it. I mean, that in of itself is a nuts thing to say, because it's played in a lot of decks already. You can Arven for it. You can Irida for it. So a bunch of other cards just got turned into boss just by existing. And it's just nuts to be able to draw 7 cards in a turn and then still gust up any Pokemon you want and switch, all plugged into one little card.
I can imagine that a lot of people are actually going to maybe struggle a little bit with this card when it first comes out. Because I remember when Guzma first came out,
Yeah.
a lot of people were kind of getting stuck with Guzma. They're like, oh, I've got Guzma for game, and then they'd look down at their board and realize they promoted the wrong Pokemon for turn because
The card that needed to attack, they promoted that one, yeah.
And because this is a one-off, like even when Guzma was, a more stable part of the format, you would always know that at the start of your turn, promote the Pokemon you don't want to have in the active because you have to gust via Guzma. Whereas now that there's a combination of boss and Prime Catcher, I think a lot of people are going to get caught out of knowing like which Pokemon to promote and like to go for
kind of like the escape rope like paradox as well, where it's like, they play escape rope, they play 4 escape rope in this list. What should I actually promote? Because it's probably not going to be the thing that ends up there. So it's interesting.
I think this card is definitely going to cause a lot of people to misplay when it first comes out.
But I think it's obviously in the name, but Prime Catcher is the prime suspect for everyone's first choice of what A-spec they're going to slot into their list. If you can't think of a better reason to play something else, you should probably play Prime Catcher. It is the default. It is just that good. It's the gold standard of A-specs.
Yeah, if you don't have a reason, like unless you're specifically playing an A-spec because you want to do something, so like your ancient ones or whatever.
Or it has perfect synergy with your deck, or you don't care about gusting.
Every deck plays 59 cards plus 1 Prime Catcher, so...
Yep.
The existence of Prime Catcher basically guarantees that every single deck is going to play an A-spec because it is a better version of a card that's already in every single deck.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're not out of A-specs yet. We've got great options for specific decks all the way down. And next, it's time for the future Pokemon to get their specific A-spec. It's not quite as good as the ancient version or as Prime Catcher, but it's good.
Silly. It's so silly to say that this is not as good as either of them, because it attaches a basic energy from your discard pile to every single one of your future Pokemon in play. So that's like up to 6 energy that you accelerate. And the fact that that is not as good as the other two.
As the alternative, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'm only accelerating 6 energy. That's not drawing.
Yeah, that's awful. Obviously, the limiting factor for this card is that, for one, to get like the full effect of it, you have to have 6 energy in the discard pile. They all have to be like the Pokemon you care about having energy have to be future Pokemon. If you got to say, for each future Pokemon in play, choose a basic energy to accelerate to your future Pokemon, that'd be nuts. I think that'd be way better. But the fact that the basic energy has to go to each different future Pokemon is the limiting factor here. That means you have to play cards like Energy Switch that currently they might not play. That I think stops this card from being a true competitor to Prime Catcher in those lists.
Obviously, I think we just haven't seen the full potential of this card yet. Whether that it just hasn't been discovered or the right cards haven't come out yet. But I think that this card at its full potential is going to be insane. It just hasn't been discovered.
This card, yeah, make no mistake, this is a very strong card. Obviously, there's one card that absolutely loves this card, and that's Iron Leaves, because it doesn't care where the energy is. You accelerate 3 grass energy onto the board, and then you bench your Iron Leaves, zoop, sucks them all up, kills a Charizard. Cool. Print out and exchange that for 2 prizes on your Charizard matchup
Iron
all
Leaves
day.
Needed to have something like Heatran GX's attack where it got rewarded for having like 6
more energy on it. Yeah. I mean, you could still play Weird V with this card.
True,
it still works. But moving on from that, we've got Hero's Cape. If you thought that Booster Capsule added a lot of HP. This is the card for you if you were looking for more. 100 HP. It's not specific either. Any Pokemon gets 100 extra HP. Obviously, the downside to this card is that it is a passive effect, and we have Lost Vacuum in the format, which if you don't get attacked and live an attack because of Hero Cape, you lost a deck slot almost, or you lost the ability to get a more immediate effect from like a Prime Catcher or any of the other really cool ace-spec cards. This is sometimes an extremely strong card, depending on whether or not your opponent plays the counters to it. So it's
also really scary because sometimes this card will actually actively hurt you because giving your opponent the option to get a mid-turn knockout with Lost Vacuum after already dealing more than the amount of damage the Pokemon originally had gives your opponent an entire extra line to map their prizing out, which plays around things like Iono as well. So usually this is really good, but it can actively hurt you.
The decks that I've been seeing use this a lot. Great Tusk to another card that boosts up the health of that card to be out of range of getting knocked out every turn. Really strong, and they don't care about gusting with Prime Catcher. They don't really need the Master Ball. That might be the only counterpoint to that card is having another Ball Search. But making sure that your Great Tusk live and make it a little bit harder for them every turn. So, but you could also just make a 440 HP Charizard EX if you're really feeling like it. And then it doesn't matter if Iron Leaves is down or not. It needs to have
440 HP Torterra.
Oh, now you're thinking.
Okay, here we go. Because if you got the Hero Escape, then you need Iron Leaves plus 3 crowns and a capsule. It's crazy.
There are some matchups where if your opponent isn't playing Lost Vacuum, then this card will just make the game almost impossible.
Especially if you play a card like Penny or Sharon's, where you can recycle the use of the card and get more value on top of that.
Imagine playing this against a deck that doesn't play Lost Vacuum.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're running out of time, so we're going to move on to Heavy Baton. This is a great card for this Iron Hands archetype we're talking about that focuses on that as your future Pokemon. If the Pokemon has a retreat cost of exactly 4, this card is attached to your active Pokemon and it's knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack. Move up to 3 basic energy from that Pokemon to a bench Pokemon in any way you like. So your Iron Hands gets knocked out.
Pokemon any way you like. It's not just to 1.
It's not just to 1.
Spread it.
So if your Iron Hands gets knocked out, you can chuck 3 of the Lightning Energy straight to another one. Ready to go. You don't even have to hit more generators or take a turn to use Miraidon to power it up again. You can just cycle Iron Hands.
Is this an Iron Hand specific card? What other Pokemon have 4 retreat that can benefit from this? Do any come to mind?
I mean, we looked at one in this video. It's the Don fan that's the future Don fan, the big boy. What's it called? Iron Boulder has 4. No, he has 3. Sorry, ignore me. Carry on.
Yeah, no. We wouldn't put anything, because 3 is a great number for the card, and 4 would enable this card to work with it, so don't be ridiculous. We wouldn't make it 4.
My apologies. I thought that there was some thought behind the design.
No, not at all. That's a filler card, because you can't put 2 of those crown future Pokemon in there. They all 3 have to be in there. But yeah, very strong for Iron Hands and future Pokemon that... Well, not future Pokemon, but Pokemon in the future that happen to have 4 retreat costs printed on them is very strong.
Guys, Torterra has 4 retreat.
Okay, well, we've broken the format.
Yeah.
We've cracked it open.
However, it only needs 1 energy to attack.
And it's a shame that we can't attach both tools. So.
Yeah.
True.
All right. Here's a good future supporter. We've been talking about it. Cryptomaniac's Deciphering. And... It's a reprint of Mallow if you've been around. Search your deck for 2 cards, shuffle your deck, then put those cards on top of it in any order. Yes, or Oracle if you've been playing even longer than all of us. It's also a reprint of that card. Very strong. Yep. I think this is going to be the strongest iteration of this effect because more so now than ever, every deck has access to drawing 2 cards on demand outside of draw supporters with the effect of Radiant Greninja. You also have stuff like Pokestop if the cards you care about putting on top are items, or electricity generator. If the cards you care about are lightning energy, you can put those on top and guarantee 2 hits off electricity generator, which is also a really cool way to use this card.
Yeah, it's funny that this card hasn't changed its text in like 25 years, but now it's just incredibly powerful, just based on the way that the game has been built around it.
Yeah.
I think this card's very,
Even the
very
barrel.
Yep,
Yeah.
the barrel as well. Squove it, draws
Yeah.
one of the two. One of the 2 cards could be a bib barrel, and then you can use bib barrel to draw the other one that you put on there.
Yep, you could use this with your Dunsparce. There's so many different things. Comfey can put 1 good card, 1 bad card on the top.
Yeah, put 1 good card plus battle pass on the top of your deck, and then flower select.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so many different ways that you can make
It's such a
very,
dumb
very
way
good.
to use your supporter for Teb, but it's funny.
Yeah, Oracle and then Squover into Squawkabilly.
You could do it.
But anyway, this is a great supporter for all of the decks that that have really strong combos. For example, Chen Pao plays Radiant Greninja. A really strong combo for this card in the past was Cross Switcher Cancelling Clone. But Cross Switcher's rotated. What are we going to do? Play Prime Catcher? Yes. And then we can play Cryptomaniac's Deciphering, search for a Cologne, and a Prime Catcher.
Does this mean you can basically play 8 Irida? Because Irida gets Rare Candy Baxcalibur, and then this gets Rare Candy Baxcalibur off of concealed cards?
Yeah, I've currently in lists I've seen of Chen Pao, we've been seeing like 4 Iridas and then 2 of this card because it's not as strong early and pretty much non-functional before Greninja gets into play, if you happen to whiff it. So yeah. Great supporter. It's going to see a lot of play in a bunch of different decks because it's a very strong ability, especially because there's so many power cards with the re-addition of Aspects into the card pool. One-off cards just got even stronger than they already were. But if the thing that's really been plaguing you in this format is you haven't been able to beat that tricky Serena EX matchup, they printed a supporter for it. Heal all damage from one of your Pokemon with 30 HP or less remaining. Getting locked out by that panic mask that Serena EX has locked you into. Never fear, Bianca's sincerity.
Time talking about Bianca's sincerity.
Because I thought about the use case for this card and I thought it was funny. But the last card on our list here is going to see a lot of play because it's super strong in the current format. We have Frenzied Gouging and Lost Requiem from Giratina V-Star. And both of them are blocked by Mist Energy. This provides colorless energy, and its effect is prevent all effective attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to the Pokemon this card is attached to. So,
Yep, that's
if you have a bad Roaring Moon matchup or a bad Giratina matchup, and the only way your Pokemon will get knocked out were because of those effects, there's your out, ladies and gentlemen. Mist Energy.
It's not even just that. It gets rid of my favorite one that it stops is Devolution TM blocks the Devolve
Yep,
effect.
absolutely.
Really cool.
And it's a special energy that can slot into Lugia as well. So that's another thing that's a nice little bonus.
I'm curious to see as the meta evolves if people are going to start playing Temple of Sinnoh to counter this.
Well, we've also at this point also seen some releases of cards that are coming in the set following this one, and we've seen the Enhanced Hammer is coming back into the rotation in the set following. So even more counterplay to special energies, especially now that we've got this Mist Energy, which is definitely going to see more play than a lot of other ones. But this is a great set. Lots of strong cards in it. Lots of new archetypes to come out of this set. Lots of strong ones too. And lots of buffs for pre-existing archetypes that were struggling, like Lugia and Arceus Giratina, getting a nice little buff. Roaring Moon getting a huge buff with the basic Roaring Moon, help supplementing its one prize Pokemon attacking suite. Now you don't need to use the Morpeko to do 70 at a time. You just do 70 by default. So
yeah, that's really good.
Chen Pao, huge buff. Golden Go, huge buff.
Yeah, true. I have a generic question just for you guys after going through the set. Which package, as of all the cards we have, not just this set but previously, which package do you think has the better card pool right now, Ancient or Future?
Tricky one, because I think that Future and Ancient are both kind of in a more advanced position of the same state, if that makes sense. So I originally, when Future and Ancient Pokemon came out, said that I think the Future Pokemon are better Like they seem to be objectively better, but the ancient Pokemon all work together better and have seen more success because of that. And I think that actually hasn't changed. So I think that the ancient Pokemon all still work together, like ancient cards all work together really, really well, which is why your Roaring Moon is going to be a good deck. And all of the future cards are really, really strong, but you just don't have enough space to use them, or they're all a little bit too convoluted to work at the moment. So like I think that the future Pokemon and the future cards are still better cards, but the ancient ones work the way that they're supposed to be working. So it's kind of it's an awkward one.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good assessment. I think the obvious thing here, and it's quite thematic, honestly, is that ancient Pokemon are themed like caveman, unga bunga, big number, go fast, hit hard, right? Nothing complicated. Vomit out a lot of energy, draw a lot of cards, effective damage or big damage, take prize card quicker your opponent. And then future Pokemon, there's so many modifications, so many options, that finding an optimal 60 is way harder to do because there are too many choices. And like looking at the list of Pokemon and trainers and all that sorts of stuff, you just get analysis paralysis being like, there has to be a perfect combination of 60 that makes a really broken deck, but you can't really you can't resolve them anything. So it's like Iron Hands, big numbers, boom 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 boom, kill kill kill, because it's really hard. Yeah, so that's why like those cards out of the future Pokemon are probably seeing more success than the others, because like apart from Iron Hands, Valiant's like the only one that's seen like that sort of success, whereas Roaring Moon started off weaker, but now that the format sort of settled, it's found its place and is like it's even like the number one deck as of like day one of the Utrecht special event that's happening at the moment. But yeah, I still think ancient Pokemon got a lot stronger from this set. Future Pokemon got a bigger buff this set, I would say, because Iron Crowns is just a huge addition to their kit. But I think they're still pretty equivalent on power. I think I just like the archetypes for the ancient Pokemon better than the future ones. And I think that's where it is for me at the moment.
For me, I think I would, if I have to pick one, I think I put Ancient ahead of Future overall, and I think there is one specific card that is to thank for that. I think it's Sada. I think Sada, just as an engine, just means that those decks are just going to work way better on average than the Future Box stuff.
It's not really fair, right?
Yeah.
Sada versus Turo.
I know. I mean, Turo's great. I love Turo, but it's not Sada.
But it doesn't specifically held out Future.
Exactly. And then Urban Vessel, the fact that that's an ancient card for no reason, just makes ancient better.
Ancient Professor's Letter is nuts.
Yeah, it's the most generic card to come from from either of the keywords that is just like a staple part of the format.
Yeah, it's just up until now the ancient Pokemon's building blocks have been stronger, but now the stronger part of their kit has come in now, and I think the room for future Pokemon to be better is huge. I think it's quite possible that future Pokemon are better than ancient, within this metagame that will come out after this set, and with every set that comes out after as well. Whereas I feel like we've seen some of the best ancient Pokemon already, but there's still a lot of future Pokemon that could synergize with all these cards better as they come out.
The classic is I think the one thing that is holding back future Pokemon from being the best is that Skyfield does not exist. That's its biggest weakness at the moment. Is you just can't bench all of them.
Future Field.
So you need some way to put extra Pokemon in play, and then suddenly that's all solved, problem solved.
Yeah,
imagine if you could play the future Ace Spec with a bench of 8 and accelerate 9 energy to your board.
And then you could have 4 Crowns and 4 Valiant, so you have 80 damage to add every turn.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
That's crazy. Then the numbers suddenly make sense. We were going to talk about we're going to hone in on those results from Japan and sort of the experience we've got and what we think is going to happen in the future. But I think we'll save that for the next one. thanks for joining us for this inaugural episode of the Trainers Mail podcast. Thank you to my co-hosts Jordan and Mitch for joining me this episode.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
No worries, guys. Well, we've got some socials set up for the podcast, but there's nothing on them at the moment because they've just been set up. Just wanted to put the placeholder in there. But we've got Trainers Mail Pod on TikTok and Instagram, and Trainers Mail Podcast on YouTube and Twitter. Stuff might eventually come up there depending on how this goes, but we'll just see how we go. And we'll see you guys next time with another episode of the Trainers Mail Podcast. Thanks for listening. Bye.